2023 to be a year of significant declines in inflation, and it's actually our job to make sure that that's the case. But I would tell you that, with inflation,
here we go. Hello, welcome to Financial
PCE
Stockholm. I'm
inflation is
Christopher
running about
Crystal, and
5%
today is
on a
Thursday,
12-month
February
basis
9th,
forward.
2023. And these are the views and thoughts that we're seeing in Sweden and the Swedish Scandinavian markets and what we're thinking. But this is not investment advice. For any investment advice, you should, of course, consult with your advisors and get your investment strategy together with them. But I'm just telling you what's happening and what I'm seeing and what we're thinking. So we get pretty much what we expect. And that was the 50 basis point hike in interest rates. We have our new RiksBank Head, and his name is Erik Thedéen. And he's a long-term employee within the financial system. He is 60 years old. He's worked with the Riksbank for quite some time. Prior to that, he also worked in several of the financial institutions within Stockholm, and he's gone to the Stockholm Economics, so the SSE. And he once wrote an article talking about the Riksbank and how it really couldn't afford to keep the best, and that they weren't able to pay the people who were the best to stick around. And yet here he is, he's head of the Riksbank. So take what you want from that. But today, I think what he's done is fantastic. He's doing a quantitative tightening. So they're selling bonds, and he's raised the basis point 50 basis points, or the interest rate 50 basis points. And he said that there's going to be further hikes this year. Now, he's receiving a lot of criticism from a former head of finance, and that was Anders Borg. He's written on LinkedIn in English that this is really very bad, and that to forecast that he's going to be raising rates isn't so good, and that we're a hard-pressed economy. And I would have to say I would disagree strongly with Anders Borg, but I think Anders is more of a Keynesian economist and likes to play around with this modern monetary theory, which is garbage. So this is a very, it's a process or a theory-driven kind of economics. And it makes economics more complicated than it needs to be. And if you understand economics, you don't need the complication or the theory. You can apply it. So the idea is to tame the inflation. And by doing a quantitative tightening, you'll get there faster than you would with this other stuff. And had Ingves acted in the past in ways that he had said he would, in terms of hiking or interest rates and lowering, we wouldn't have had this problem with the need for the quantitative tightening. And so this is, in my opinion, very good. We get what we've expected. Now, to deny this is the same as the current political parties, the Social Democrats, who shut down our nuclear power plants, or had the nuclear power plants shut down under their administration, and yet say it's not their fault that nuclear power plants were shut down. It's kind of like saying it's not your fault the car crashed when you were driving, or that when you were driving drunk, it's not your fault the car crashed. It just, it's not really logical to say these things. But so I'm on the side that this is very good, and I would make a comparison to Paul Volcker when he raised the interest rates in America. This is back during the time of the Carter time and the Ronald Reagan time, and Richard Nixon. He raised the rates to the point where you had CDs, commercial deposits, were at 20 basis points. Okay, you could get interest at 20 on your CD. So these were, the commercial deposits were. It was a great way to make money. I knew a doctor that made a lot of money at that time. And he didn't even invest in the market, and you couldn't invest in the market. You had the Nifty 50; it just didn't do anything. You had stockbrokers on Wall Street were trading in their broker jacket in the evening to drive cabs in order to feed their families. This was a terrible time, and we were going through a period of near bankruptcy for the city of New York. We had Mayor Lindsay, and it was just a terrible time. So Paul Volcker saved the United States economy and took the tough times up front. And I think right now Erik Thedéen is doing the same thing. Now, I'm sure he's going to be under a lot of criticism, but if the government acts in the right way, the Swedish economy will rebound much faster. And this is where Anders Borg is correct. The Swedish economy will probably rebound faster than the rest of Europe. And this way will make us very, very strong and make us very competitive, especially if we start building up our electrical grid and we can build our manufacturing. We need to do this in Sweden, and Europe needs to do this, but we're doing it faster and better. This would be fantastic. And we will probably see those 100,000 people moving into the north faster than anticipated. And that would mean a faster than anticipated recovery. I don't think we'll see a recovery this year in terms of, well, what I mean by that is a rate drop. I don't think we'll see a rate drop this year. I think we'll see the rate continue to go up through till December. And then we may see the recovery where we start to see the rates going down again. But this is something that needs to happen now. And you know, just like the Swedish Democrats don't want to say they're responsible for the closure of the nuclear reactors and putting us in this pinch on our energy prices, it's the same thing as the Swedish Democrats, who say that they don't have any neo-Nazi ties, and every other week you find out that one of their party members is not only in communication but a member of one of these neo-Nazi parties. You know, we have you know, some serious problems with our politicians, but you know, you have to be honest and you have to address them. So what we're seeing next is our NATO application. Sweden's looking at Finland. Finland looks to kind of sail on through. The United States, Anthony Blinken is saying, don't worry, we'll get you through. This is something we look to have you a part of, is NATO. So Sweden will be a member of NATO. But the United States, remember, has been asked by Turkey to send over F-16 and F-15 fighter jets. So really the NATO is controlled by the United States, who supported it for all those years when European nations were not making their contributions. Well, it was the United States. So at some point, there'll be a discussion between Biden and Erdogan and or the US administration and Turkey will vote for Sweden to join. So I don't really see this as an issue. It's just Finland maybe goes first, but that's okay. They're closer to the Russian nukes than we are in Sweden. So they've also had the invasion forces on their doorsteps in the past and fought them off. So we'll see what happens. Zelensky is making a pitch to the EU today to get a faster application process through, and this comes after he spent the day with Rishi Sunak yesterday in the UK, asking for fighter jets and training of fighter pilots. So you know, this is going to be a long-term endeavor. We may have something like a North Korea, South Korea situation, or Israeli-Palestine situation set up in the Ukraine. You know, we already had those comments from the former Israeli prime minister saying the peace talks were scuttled by the NATO. We had an article yesterday published by Cy Hirsch. This is the same person who wrote My Massacre. He talks about the Nord Stream 1 and 2. He speculates he has a source that gives him information about the Baltops 21 or Baltops 22 and how Norway and the United States planted the explosives along the Nord Stream pipeline and then detonated them with a sonar buoy. Now, I think that's a very interesting concept. When I said back in September that I thought the United States would be the one behind it, or at least the UK, and I highlighted the Baltic operations, and you see the ship names and so forth, I didn't think it would be a sonar buoy, but yeah. So I would agree with this assessment or speculation by Seymour Hirsch, and you can go to his Substack and read it. It's being talked about widely in the US, and it's being talked about widely by you know, those who are opposed to the war and wondering what's going on. So Sweden's not talking about this. We're also ignoring what's going on with the Biden Hunter Biden laptop from hell. You know, Sweden is more focused on, will Biden be the president? It really doesn't matter, because the only candidate that is against the war in the United States is pretty much Donald Trump. And I do not really foresee that he'll be a candidate or the final candidate for the Republican side. It looks more to be Ron DeSantis. And on the DeSantis candidacy, it could be somebody like Ron DeSantis. It could be somebody like Tulsi Gabbard. It could be somebody like Nikki Haley. But the candidacy does not look to be Donald Trump. And even if it was Donald Trump, then I think you might have Biden winning again. So it would be. But what I think is more interesting to note is that Lula in Brazil is not pro-war, and he's not going to be sending any tanks over to the Ukraine. He wants to see a negotiation. Remember, Lula has had very strong relations with Russia. He's had strong relationships with China. He'll be visiting China in March, sitting down with Chairman Xi. And I think you will see more on the peace talk side from the BRICS nations than a continued war, which is why I think you would see something similar to a situation like you've already have in the Middle East or in Korea. I would see that. Within the markets, of course, the banks continue to report strong profitability. Handelsbanken did get hurt based on the increased cost. But the banks in general, as the rates are going up, they'll continue to make money. And this was no surprise with the bank rates. But I think what's more surprising is what we'll see with the ESG. And then so we have discussions on what's happening with Hybrid. This is our fossil-free steel company, and this is a combination between SSAB and our the steel mining and welding union, the LKAB. So these companies are producing the fossil-free. And remember, our former prime minister gave away candle holders to the Biden administration to say, look, these are our first fossil-free candle holders. Not a lot of steel, but it was the thought that counts, right? Pharmaceuticals, they continue to do well. Our transport companies, our train company is not really is not going to pay a dividend, but it at least made it to a profit. And this is despite all the payment mess that they went through, where they couldn't make the payments, people had troubles. So we'll see what happens there. Our real estate companies continue to be under pressure. Wallenstam had a huge write-down, and Wallenstam is similar to we had Castellum, which you saw the CEO, the founder, had to leave yesterday, or he left with immediate effect. So the real estate market within Sweden is still of interest, and you can see a lot developing there. And remember, talk to your advisor to see what you'd want to do. But I think the Swedish press is now, we've had a lot of the news out of our sales for the market. We'll be moving more towards or focused more on how the NASDAQ market is going to work. So we're looking at things like Google, the AI, we're looking at Twitter and what's happening there. We're not talking about free press in the terms of First Amendment. We're talking about free press that's regulated. And that means regulated within the terms of what the European Union wants. So that's like a company like Rumble will not see the press so free. After the Brazilian election, they were outlawed in France because they were showing what was going on in Brazil, which eventually led up to this revolt that you had, and property destruction at their state house, and just really kind of a silliness and riots, and eventually the candidates' supporters doing bad things. But you didn't see it, and you didn't get Rumble. You only got the final announcement where you said, "Hey, look what's happened." So that's kind of what the Swedish press is looking at. So we'll follow more on what's happening in the technology sector in the U.S., where we have a strong correlation. And we've had a strong correlation for a long period of time. But I think overall, the U.S. market and the Swedish market, I think, will continue up through June, because now the rates are going to be going up. Now and Swedish economy is an economy where people plan, people save, and people spend, and they spend within their means, generally speaking. So I think we'll see a stronger performance in the markets, and even with some dividends being cut, we're looking at the dividend stocks. That's what the Swedish investor is doing, and what the foundations are doing. They're looking for the strength of investments through dividends. So you look to see, I think, my personal feeling is that the market will continue to move up. Talk to your advisor, see what they think, and take a look at the forecast on the GDP and how China, remember, China and the US are trading more than ever. You have over 600 and I think $50 billion in trade going between. Now, yes, you have over 550 for China and I think 120, so maybe it's 670 in trade, total trade between the US and China, but you still have a significant amount of trade going between these two countries. You're not going to have a war, in my opinion, between the US and China. That would just be a complete shutdown of the economies. And the what's developing in Taiwan, again, the KMT, which is the Kuomintang, they are more pro-China. They've had meetings with Emperor Xi. You have the representative flying over to mainland China. If he was that afraid, he wouldn't fly. You could see what happened to Jack Ma. They put him in re-education, and he's come out and he's very acquiescent to Emperor Xi. You have the tennis star. So if the KMT is traveling back and forth between China and Taiwan, I don't think that they're so worried about a Chinese takeover. I think this would be a acquisition, and you would see a development of the process between Taiwan and China. And so that, it's just like how Russia is able to sell oil and gas into India. India does the refining and sells it back to Europe. So it's, I don't really see any great threats to the market. The threats are obviously the war in Ukraine escalating to a nuclear, and then, okay, if it escalates to a nuclear, that's a completely different ball game. And there's not much to say there other than we have a real kind of mass destruction happening. What else is a threat to the market? Well, I think when the BRICS release their currency, which would be, in my opinion, gold-based and commodity-based. Don't forget, Russia's bought last year 50 million metric tons of gold bullion, and China bought 32 million metric tons of gold bullion. These are, significant purchases. Even though Russia recently sold off some, bullion and some Chinese yuan to meet their deficit, they met their deficit. So they're not operating at a deficit. That's a positive for their economy. And it's a positive with the Chinese economy. These are two countries that are, basing what they're going to do on gold. China is making the world pay in Chinese yuan. So they've rolled out the Chinese yuan. Russia is making countries pay in rubles. So, Brazil not going in with NATO to send tanks to the Ukraine and saying, hey, why aren't we seeing more negotiations, is another sign of what could possibly happen with the BRICS. And so you have Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then you have countries in South America, Latin America, and other countries within the Middle East that are part of the BRICS plus. If they release a currency, this would be something that would be, I think, initially seen as a negative because it would be negative for the dollar, but I think very rapidly it would be a positive effect for the market. So overall, in my opinion, it's a little rosy. The fundamentals I don't see as very strong, but I do see what's happening in the market being perceived positively, and I would say that that is a positive move for the markets. So my feeling is you continue to see an upswing, and that's just my thoughts. Talk with your advisor. When you look at the global GDP forecast, I don't think you're going to see any bright spots. But remember, you already had this telegraphed to you by the BRICS or by the OPEC, because when they said they were cutting production by 2 million barrels a day, this is triggered by their economist. Okay, they pay their economists to go to the best schools, and these economists have to be right. And they were cutting production by 2 million barrels a day. That's a sign of the global GDP dropping, or at least they felt the global GDP was going to drop. Now we're in that phase of production cuts, and the prices are not spiking, but you are seeing the future prices, they were going up. So we'll see what happens, but it looks to be a positive. We are in effectively a contango. but you'd rather see a contango than a backwardization. So, look up those terms if you like. And of course, send us your questions. Hopefully you've liked what we're doing and you're subscribed. And, send us your request. We'll open up a chat on the Substack. So thank you very much, and we'll talk very soon. Bye-bye.